Hey everyone, welcome back. You know, we all want to grasp the really big, important stuff out there, but quickly, right? Not drown in a sea of information.
Totally.
Well, that's what we're all about here, cutting through the noise. And today, we're diving deep, deep into a field that's, well, it's transforming right before our eyes. How AI, artificial intelligence, is changing the very practice of law.
It's huge.
Right. We've got this fascinating chapter that goes way beyond, like, just basic automation. It's about AI fundamentally reshaping legal services as we know them.
Yeah, reshaping, reconstructing. It's really something.
And we're going to unpack all of it,
Hmm.
from how courts are moving online to how AI is handling contracts, even disputes. And trust me, some of what we found is really surprising.
Definitely surprised. Not just minor tweaks here and there. This source material. It's basically saying the legal landscape is being rebuilt,
Yeah.
like actively, and AI is the construction crew. So we'll be looking at online courts, of course,
Right.
the whole automation of contracts, which is getting really sophisticated. AI's role in resolving disagreements, that's a big one.
Absolutely.
And then what does all this mean practically for the legal profession itself? And honestly, for anyone who needs legal services, by the time we're done here, you'll have a much deeper understanding of all these changes and why they matter. To you, to all of us, really.
Okay, so let's start with online courts. I mean, most of us have probably encountered some version of this, right?
Yeah.
But it's easy to think, oh, it's just video conferencing, but it's so much bigger than that. This chapter, it points out that even before 2020 and everything that happened then, places were already experimenting.
Mm-hmm.
Franklin County, Ohio, there was a court in Utah. They were doing these pilot programs with online dispute resolution, for smaller claims.
Makes sense. Start small.
And get this, in 2018, Utah actually made online dispute resolution mandatory for certain types of small claims. It's amazing to see how these early kind of under-the-radar experiments, they paved the way for what became this rapid, widespread shift when the pandemic hit. I'm curious, from those early trials, were there any lessons learned that maybe weren't expected that helped inform how online courts got rolled out more broadly?
That's a good question. And one thing that jumps out, especially with the CRT, the Civil Resolution Tribunal in British Columbia, is how they really took feedback to heart. Their design, it's iterative, always improving based on what users were saying.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really committed to using plain language in all their online tools, which has made a huge difference for people who don't have lawyers. It's lowered the barriers to entry significantly.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, for anyone out there who's ever had to deal with the legal system, and let's face it, who hasn't at some point, this shift to online courts has some real tangible benefits. Like, think about accessibility and convenience.
Oh, yeah.
If you're in a rural area, if getting around is tough for you, being able to participate in legal stuff from home, that's life-changing. It's a huge step towards better access to justice for everyone and the time saved. No more commuting to court, taking a whole day off work just to sit in a waiting room.
Totally. And if we zoom out a bit, online courts could really democratize the whole legal system. For people who've faced obstacles, getting to court, affording it, this is a game changer. And let's not forget, it's less administrative burden on the courts themselves and lower costs for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Less travel, quicker resolutions, it adds up.
But of course, we have to talk about fairness. This chapter doesn't shy away from that, and rightly so.
For sure.
There are valid concerns about due process, about whether people feel like they're getting a fair hearing when it's all happening online.
You lose that face-to-face, right?
Yeah, exactly. That ability to really assess witnesses, see their reactions, all of that. And the Florida Supreme Court, they even addressed this in 2023, acknowledged those questions. So how are courts making sure that this move online doesn't mean compromising anyone's right to a fair hearing?
You're hitting on a point that's fundamental to the whole legal system. I mean, it's got a long history, it's centuries of tradition built on in-person interactions.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we make sure those virtual proceedings are just as solid that they protect due process? That's a huge focus right now. Courts are actively working on protocols, developing technologies that will help people participate meaningfully in this new online environment. Secure video platforms, guidelines for how witnesses give testimony remotely. It's all evolving rapidly.
Our source also brings up another crucial issue, the digital divide. Not everyone has reliable internet access or even a private space to have these online hearings.
Absolutely. It's not a level playing field technologically, and that's a problem. But the chapter also talks about some of the solutions being explored. Utah, way back when they were first adopting online courts, they had these opt-out provisions for people who had tech limitations. And now we're seeing things like user guides, even physical kiosks in public spaces. So folks who aren't as comfortable with tech can still navigate these systems.
And then, of course, there are the security and privacy concerns. Courts handle incredibly sensitive information, and the idea of hacking unauthorized access, it's really worrying.
It's a valid concern. The confidentiality of those proceedings, the integrity of the whole system, that's paramount. The source really emphasizes how important it is for courts to invest in strong, encrypted systems. And training, making sure everyone involved knows how to handle data securely, best practices, all of that. And things like virtual breakout rooms where lawyers can talk to their clients privately during proceedings, those safeguards are essential.
The chapter also gives us this really in-depth look at a specific example, the Civil Resolution Tribunal, the CRT in British Columbia. It seems like a really well-developed model of how these online courts can work. What makes the CRT so noteworthy?
Well, what's really interesting about the CRT is, like I said earlier, they've been so good at taking feedback and making changes. They're constantly improving based on what users tell them. And they're very committed to using clear, simple language in all their online tools. It's made a big difference in making the system accessible to people who don't have a lawyer, which is a big deal. It launched back in 2012, started with small claims and condo disputes, and has been expanding its jurisdiction ever since.
So it didn't try to do everything at once.
Right, exactly. And the source lays out this four-stage process, very deliberate.
Yeah.
First, there's information gathering. They call it the Solution Explorer. Then there's a chance for online negotiation. After that, there's facilitation, often over the phone or email with people exchanging documents. And finally, if needed, there's adjudication, which can involve written arguments or video hearings with the option to appeal to a judge if someone isn't satisfied with the outcome.
So it's definitely not just jumping straight to video calls. There's a real structure to the whole online process.
Absolutely. And as the source points out, the whole goal is to make resolving those smaller disputes more efficient and easier for everyone.
Right.
And they've gotten a lot of recognition for that. There's been some debate, about how much legal representation is allowed at certain stages.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, legal professionals tend to see the CRT as a really valuable model for how online courts can be done well. The clear rules, the fact that they're regularly updated, and how they blend different ways of resolving disputes, those are all key parts of their success.
And this whole shift to online, it changes how lawyers have to operate too, doesn't it? I mean, representing someone in a virtual courtroom, that requires different skills.
It does. It's not just about the law anymore. It's also about knowing how to use these online systems effectively, making sure your clients are comfortable with the tech, knowing how to present evidence digitally, all of that.
Right, right. Okay, so we've talked about how tech is changing, where legal proceedings happen, how they happen. Let's switch gears a bit and look at another big area this chapter highlights, automated contracts. This is where AI is really starting to revolutionize things.
Absolutely. The chapter dives into how AI tools, specifically generative AI like ChatGPT and Claude, are being used more and more to create first drafts of contracts. It's a big change from the old way of doing things where lawyers would sit down and write everything out manually.
It sounds so tedious.
It could be, and time-consuming.
Yeah. And the big advantage here is speed, right? And efficiency.
For sure.
Lawyers can input the key details and boom, they've got a starting point. It's almost instant. And the chapter mentions that AI can produce a pretty solid first draft in about 60% of cases. A recent survey, it said that most lawyers see these AI tools as a really helpful starting point. That's a lot of time saved, not having to worry about all the boilerplate language and formatting. So when we talk about AI actually drafting contracts, what are the biggest changes to a lawyer's workflow that our sources are highlighting?
I'd say the biggest shift is away from those purely mechanical tasks, the drafting itself, and more towards strategic review and making sure the contract is customized for the client. Lawyers now have more time to focus on what really matters, making sure the agreement reflects their client's needs, understanding the risks involved, and negotiating those crucial terms that are specific to the deal.
So it's not about replacing the lawyer, it's about freeing them up to do the higher level thinking.
Right. But the chapter is very clear about this. AI isn't a replacement for human review. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. Just because AI can spit out something that looks like a contract doesn't mean it's legally sound or right for every situation. Lawyers still have to go through it carefully, make sure it complies with all the relevant laws, protects their clients' interests, and actually reflects the terms everyone agreed on.
And this is interesting. Some judges are now making lawyers formally confirm that any AI-generated text they submit to the court has been reviewed by a human. It's a direct response to those cases where AI messed up, like making up legal citations. It highlights how important human oversight is, and that ultimately lawyers are accountable for what they present, even if AI helped create it.
That makes sense. But this evolution, it goes beyond drafting, right?
Yeah.
Our source is saying that AI is getting involved in the actual negotiation of contracts. We've seen how it's speeding up the drafting part. Now, the next logical step is how does it change that back and forth, that dance of reaching an agreement?
Right. And the chapter mentions these contract review platforms that have been developed. They can compare a draft agreement against a company's own policies
Hmm.
or even their past contracts,
Interesting.
automatically flag any differences or inconsistencies.
Very correct.
But what's even more cutting edge is AI actually taking part in the negotiations.
It sounds almost futuristic, like AI is at the negotiating table.
It's getting there. Our source talks about this proof of concept from late 2023, where two AI systems, they successfully negotiated a non-disclosure agreement.
Wow.
Minimal human involvement. Exchanged drafts back and forth, reached a consensus super fast, minutes. It's pretty remarkable.
That is amazing. I mean, what kind of parameters were those AI systems working within, and were there any points where they got stuck, where they didn't know what to do?
Well, the specifics, they depend on the AI model and the platform being used. But generally, these systems, they're trained on tons of data, previous agreements that have been negotiated. They can figure out the key clauses, understand the usual sticking points, and then respond based on whatever strategies they've been programmed with. In that NDA example, they were probably focused on standard terms, things like confidentiality obligations, how the information could be used, how long the agreement would last. But it's important to remember that was a pretty standard agreement. More complex negotiations where the terms are unique or there's a lot of disagreement, that'll likely still require a human touch.
Makes sense.
And speaking of innovation, this leads us to another fascinating development, smart contracts on the blockchain.
Right, smart contracts. These are the ones where the terms are coded right into the agreement, and actions happen automatically when certain conditions are met. The chapter gave examples like payments and supply chains, and even how music royalties are distributed.
That's a really good example. The entertainment company that was able to calculate and pay out music royalties automatically based on usage data. That can cut down on disputes, those delays that often happen with royalties.
Definitely.
And because those contracts are on a blockchain, which is basically a secure, tamper-proof ledger, there's always a record of what happened. It's really transparent.
So, in this world where contracts are becoming more and more automated, what does it mean for lawyers? What's their role?
It's definitely changing. The chapter stresses that lawyers will need to work closely with tech experts to make sure those smart contracts are coded correctly, that the legal terms are reflected accurately. And there's this new role emerging, the smart contract auditor. These are legal pros who specialize in checking that smart contracts are legally sound and secure. But even more broadly, the lawyer's role is shifting away from just being the drafter of contracts. They're becoming more like editors, negotiators, strategic advisors, and they're overseeing all these AI-driven processes.
Right, so it's not about lawyers becoming obsolete, it's about their skills evolving.
Exactly. There's been some concern, about new lawyers not getting enough experience with the nitty-gritty of drafting.
Right.
But the argument is that they'll gain more experience in other areas, things like strategic planning, advising clients, assessing risks. Those are all really important skills, too.
And there's that Sarah the startup lawyer scenario in the chapter. She's using AI to draft those basic NDAs super quickly so she can spend more time with her clients, really understanding their needs and goals.
I like that example. It's about using AI to boost efficiency, so lawyers can focus on those tasks that require human judgment and expertise.
So we've gone from creating contracts to negotiating them. Now let's talk about what happens when things go wrong, when there's a dispute. AI-driven dispute resolution, that's another area that's ripe for change.
It is. The chapter introduces us to these AI-powered platforms that are being used for mediation. They can analyze what each side in a dispute is saying, look at tons of data from past cases, and then suggest possible solutions. They're data-driven, they don't get tired or emotional, and they can handle a lot of cases, which is why companies like eBay and Amazon are using them to resolve millions of small disputes.
It's amazing how they can handle that volume.
It is.
But mediation, it often feels so personal, so human. Our source mentions that some human mediators, they worry about losing that element, the empathy, the ability to understand people's emotions and how they're feeling.
It's a valid point. AI can do a lot, provide data, identify paths to a settlement, but it might not always grasp those subtle emotional things that play a big role in resolving disputes. The chapter suggests that the best approach might be a hybrid one, where AI helps human mediators. You get the efficiency of AI combined with the empathy and experience of a person.
So it's not about one replacing the other. It's about finding ways for them to work together.
Exactly. And then there's predictive analytics, which is being used in litigation.
Mm.
That's another way AI is changing things.
Right. And that sounds like it could really impact how legal strategies are developed.
Definitely. It has the potential to change things in a big way. So these AI algorithms, they can analyze huge amounts of data, past court decisions, case filings, all sorts of stuff. And then they can try to predict what might happen in a current case. Things like who's likely to win, what kind of settlement might be reached, how long the case will take, even how certain judges might rule on specific issues.
That's wild.
It is. And by comparing the details of a current case to all those historical patterns, AI can give lawyers these data-driven insights. It's like having a crystal ball almost, but based on data.
It sounds incredibly powerful. And the potential benefits, like being able to settle cases early and avoid lengthy, costly litigation, or just having a much better understanding of the risks and being able to budget accordingly, those are huge.
They are. But the source is careful to point out the potential downsides, too. There are ethical concerns, questions about how reliable these predictions are. They stress that lawyers still need to use their own judgment, that they can't just blindly trust the AI.
Right. So a healthy dose of skepticism is always a good thing.
Absolutely. The chapter uses this example of a law firm, Jackson and Lee, I think it was, where they used predictive analytics to get a sense of the settlement range in a personal injury case. And it's a good example of how AI can be a valuable guide, but it shouldn't replace the lawyer's knowledge and experience, especially if the data the AI is using is biased or incomplete. Relying on those predictions could be risky.
Right, right. So there's a lot of promise here, a lot of potential for things like efficiency, maybe even better access to justice for more people. But the chapter also raises some important concerns about over-automating things. It seems like the legal world is being cautious, not just jumping in with both feet, and that makes sense.
Yeah, the legal profession is known for being pretty careful about new tech, and in this case, that caution is warranted.
For sure.
The chapter talks about this concept called automation bias, which is basically the tendency to trust the output of automated systems too much, even when there are red flags.
We can all fall into that trap, I think.
We can. And we've seen some recent responses to this, like those orders in Texas and New York, where judges are now requiring lawyers to verify any filings that were written by AI and to disclose if they used AI at all. It's a way of addressing these concerns.
And the risks are real, right? Things like giving up on a case too early because the AI says it's a lost cause, or what they call hallucinations, where the AI generates false information, even made up legal citations.
Yeah, that's scary.
And then there's the problem of some AI algorithms being like black boxes, where you can't really see how they reach their conclusion.
Right, the lack of transparency can be a big issue. It makes it hard to trust the AI's output.
Yeah.
The consensus among experts seems to be that AI can be a great tool for handling those data-heavy tasks in dispute resolution. But it should support human judges and arbitrators, not replace them, especially when it comes to hearings and making final decisions. Ultimately, AI in this context is about augmenting what humans can do, not taking over completely.
Right.
It's still going to require people to deal with the emotional aspects of disputes, the ethical questions, and those new legal issues that are constantly popping up.
It's that human element that's always going to be crucial. So let's talk about the bigger picture, the navigating regulatory, ethical, and social considerations part. As AI becomes more deeply embedded in the practice of law, how are people grappling with those implications?
Well, the chapter points out that this is a conversation that's happening everywhere, within the legal community, among regulators, in the public at large. It's an ongoing discussion, and different approaches are emerging. Some places are experimenting with these regulatory sandboxes where they can test out new AI legal tech in a controlled environment. And legal ethics rules are being updated to keep pace with the technology. Things like being transparent about using AI, making sure AI algorithms aren't biased, and safeguarding client confidentiality, even when using these new tools.
And at the end of the day, it's still the lawyers who are responsible. What do you think?
Absolutely. They can't just blame the AI if something goes wrong. The source makes that very clear.
And what about the social impact of all this?
Well, there's the potential for AI to close the justice gap, make legal services more affordable, easier to access, especially for people who've been underserved in the past.
That would be fantastic.
It would. But there's also the risk that it could make things worse, widen the gap, if these fancy AI tools are too expensive for smaller firms or individuals to use.
Right, it's a double-edged sword in a way.
It is. And then there's the impact on jobs. Some roles in the legal field might shrink or even disappear, while new ones emerge, like legal technologists or AI ethics specialists. Maintaining public trust in the whole system, that's going to be key. And that means making sure these AI-powered systems are fair, accessible, and transparent. It's going to require careful thought and ongoing dialogue.
Okay, so as we look ahead to this future where AI is playing a bigger and bigger role in law, how should lawyers and the whole profession approach it? Our chapter has some thoughts on what it calls leadership in an AI-enhanced legal future. So what does effective leadership look like in this new world?
The chapter acknowledges that the legal field has always been a bit slow to embrace new tech.
Right. Cautious is probably a polite way to put it.
That's fair. But they argue that there needs to be a balance, being careful, but also open to the possibilities. And for future leaders in law, they say it's crucial to have both a solid grounding in the fundamentals of law and what they call AI fluency. That means understanding how these technologies work, how to use them ethically and effectively.
So it's not just about knowing the law, it's about knowing the tech, too.
Exactly. And good communication skills are going to be even more important, bridging that gap between the legal world, the tech world, and the clients.
And the chapter talks about the need for more interdisciplinary teams, bringing together lawyers, coders, user experience designers, data scientists, all working together.
Right, because no one person can be an expert in everything. But the chapter also makes it clear that the human aspects of law, they're not going away.
Right. We can't just hand everything over to the machines.
Exactly. Qualities like empathy, the ability to think creatively and solve problems, having a strong ethical compass, those are always going to be essential for lawyers. The chapter encourages lawyers to embrace AI, but to do it responsibly, using it to improve the quality of their services and make them accessible to more people.
It's about finding that balance, the right way to integrate these powerful tools without losing sight of what makes law a human endeavor.
Right. And anyone who just resists change altogether, well, they're going to get left behind. And they highlight this emerging role, the legal technologist, someone who really understands both the law and the tech. And continuous learning is going to be essential. Keeping up with professional development, staying informed about new tech, all of that. And a healthy dose of skepticism is important too. Don't just take what the AI says at face value, question it, test it. Ultimately, AI has the potential to make lawyers more effective, free them up to focus on those tasks that really require human intelligence and judgment.
And then there's that deep legal case study, which is a really cool example of how this can all come together.
Yeah, deep legal, it's presented as a really innovative model. Instead of just reacting to legal problems as they pop up, it's all about being proactive, managing risk before it becomes a big issue.
I like that.
They use AI-powered tools to constantly monitor a client's operations, track changes in regulations, scan contracts for potential red flags, watch for suspicious financial activity, all of that.
So it's like having an early warning system.
Exactly. It's about catching things before they blow up into major disputes. And it's not just about using the tech either. Human lawyers are still essential. They do the high-level analysis, interpret what the AI finds, and come up with strategies to address any risks.
So it's a partnership, really.
Right. And the chapter even suggests that law firms could start by trying these systems out on a small scale, see how they work, before rolling them out more broadly. Deep legal is a really interesting example of how legal services can be reimagined in this new world where AI is a key player.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap because we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about how online courts are evolving, using the CRT as a prime example. Then we got into how AI is automating contract processes, from drafting to negotiation, even those smart contracts on the blockchain. We explored how AI is changing dispute resolution with things like AI-powered mediation and predictive analytics. And we talked about the big ethical, regulatory, and social implications of all this. And finally, we looked at what it means to be a leader in this AI-driven future with that deep legal case study as a glimpse of what that future might hold.
It's a lot to take in, but the key takeaways are clear. AI has the potential to make the legal field more efficient, improve access to justice, and really transform how things are done. But we have to be mindful of the human element, the ethical considerations, and the importance of fairness. Those things are non-negotiable.
Absolutely. So, as you're listening to all of this, thinking about the ways AI is changing the legal landscape, here's something to ponder. Of all these applications we've talked about, online courts, The automation of contracts, AI in dispute resolution. Which one do you think has the most potential? Or maybe presents the biggest challenge? It's something to chew on. Maybe you'll want to dig deeper into some of the specific AI legal tech companies out there, or see what the latest guidelines are on AI ethics in law. The point is, you're now much better equipped to not only understand all of this, but to be part of the conversation as it
And
unfolds.
that's what it's all about.